We good to go? Okay, guys. We obviously Saturday was very disappointing and frustrating. I think it's important for everybody to know, personally taking total ownership of that. Everything that happens within our team and our organization is my responsibility. So we need to do much better. The film is a combination of mental errors, fundamental and technique issues, and then some decision making. There's no doubt that we can help the players and try to put them in better positions at times. And then, I think it's one thing to know, but we also have to go apply, and I think that's kind of where we're at from a player perspective. And I think as teachers, we have to take a good look in the mirror of our weekly process, and I do think there's no excuses. There's no place for blame. I think responsibility, accountability is the only option here. So the most important thing, and I told the players after the game Saturday, is that they stick together. I think their camaraderie, their relationships as teammates, this will pass, and then they're going to have these relationships 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And it's important that they stick together and they do their part as teammates. I do think that we can't control what is said on the outside or done on the outside. We can control what is said within the walls. When we show up to work every day in this building, our words, our attitude, our actions, the way we treat people, the way that we interact with each other as teammates, and then the intensity and the urgency and the approach to the work is the most important part. So, look, we're getting ready to transition here into Mississippi State game. I do think Jeff Levy's a heck of a coach, first-year head coach, but he's had a great success as an offensive coordinator. I've known Jeff for a long time. This is a first road game, first SEC road game, and we would say regardless of the opponent or who you are in this league, when you go play on the road, you have to anticipate that it will be very challenging. It's a tough place to play. I've been to Starkville many times, and certainly can be a challenge there. An 11 a.m. Central kick will contribute as well. They do have offensively the tempo is something that we'll have to try to simulate this week, and there's a ton of variables on defense, front pressure coverage, and then good team speed. And that's always a recipe for some challenges when it comes to special teams and matchups there. So singular focus on the work. I do think that ton of distractions and noise. We all anticipate and understand that. I do think work is extremely hard, recover, show up, work extremely hard, recover. What is the next opportunity to improve and really take the right attitude towards that. Total focus on the next opportunity to improve. Now to start today, obviously we'll put the game to bed, and then when we walk out of that team meeting room and go to practice today, I think it's a singular focus on the next challenge, and that's Mississippi State. What questions do we have here?
Billy, have there been any discussions or you've been told anything about your future?
No, none.
Do you feel like there's still a path to earn a fourth season if the team can get it together and
100%.
get on a roll?
100%.
Were you given any assurances like when you got here, because it's a 7-year deal, and
Right.
You've talked a lot about the process, the rebuild, the challenges of it, that you were going to be given X amount of time to do this?
Yeah, I mean, these are all hypothetical scenarios. I think for me, I'm going to try to model what I would expect from our players, okay? And some of those things I just talked about, I think that's the whole key, is that as a staff and throughout the organization, we have to do our part to model what we would expect from the players and want from the players. And that, for me, is total focus on the next opportunity to improve, right? So, we're going to put the game to bed today from Saturday, and then it's about doing my absolute best to prepare the team to play next Saturday. And we can't live in the shoulda, coulda, woulda, if, then, all that. I think ultimately we got an obligation to the players and our leadership at the university to do our best to play well this week. That's all we can control. Anything else is a waste of time, you know. And look, I think it's that way regardless. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. The ability to hit the reset button, sometimes you're trying to ignore the hype or the praise and then sometimes you fall flat on your face and you're trying to. So your approach with the players, the right mix of accountability and ownership, you know, I think it's critical that we don't point fingers and that we accept some responsibility and point out where there needs to be accountability. You know, I think that's the key, especially with young people in the world that they live in currently.
I hear what you're saying in terms of the outside noise, and a lot of times it doesn't matter, but it can matter in terms of recruiting. What's your message to recruits about where things are right now and where they're going?
Well, there's a lot of football left to play, you know, and you know, nothing will affect that more than the next game we play, right? So let's get ready to go play Mississippi State on Saturday.
What about, you know, going on the road, first road game, you alluded to it, there's some challenges there, but can it have a galvanizing effect given the adversity, or how do you view that aspect of this week?
Yeah, no, I just think in general, regardless of what team you are in this league or what opponent you're playing, when it's your first road SEC game, regardless of who it is and where it is, you got to be ready to go because there's a little bit different intensity to that. You're going into enemy territory and you got to be ready.
You talk about looking in the mirror and maybe some of that self-reflection. Do you think you've done a good enough job bringing in defensive help? I mean, certainly you look on the offensive side of the ball, Montrell, Osiris, you've done fantastic
Sure.
with receivers, with Pearsall, DK, and Badger, the position you know really well. The other side of the ball just doesn't look like it's gotten the fixes that it's needed.
Right. Well, I think that time will tell. You know, I mean, ultimately, I think this is a group that gained some experience last year. I do think that obviously we're frustrated with the production to this point, but I do think there's a lot of football left to play. And that's where we have to have the right combination of, you know, player accountability, and then as coaches we have to take some responsibility as well. And we have to just, you know, I think if we continue to do the same things, then, you know, I think that would not be the smartest path. So I think, you know, as a defensive staff, I know there's direction there, there's ownership there. And yeah, just a little bit different approach, tweak things. I think it's critical in times like these that you listen to the players a little bit. I think you got to give them some ownership. It's important that they believe in what's happening and what's taking place, and painting an objective picture for them. You know, I think it's really important. So knowing that there's a lot of subjective out there, how do we create an objective environment where we can be truthful? I think that's the whole key. And then I think you'd be surprised how aware they are. They know when they've messed up. They know when they're in a tough spot. They know when the coaches can do better. So I think a combination of all that's the most important thing.
How about the offensive line, when you evaluated on the tape, how much of it was physicality, communication, or what did you see in terms of the breakdown?
Yeah, no, I do think that A&M's front is good. I think in particular one of the edge players, one of the inside players are elite next level type players. We blocked them well at times. We didn't block them well at times. I think some of it is fundamentals, techniques. I think it's footwork, it's hat position, it's hand placement. But there's also just some personnel things that we can help. And I think we got to pick from the right stuff. You know, I think that's an important part of developing the identity of your offense. Is like, what do you do well? And we just didn't really have a lot of rhythm in the first half. I mean, I think we had 12 plays outside of that last possession. So 4, 5, and 6 play possessions, something like that. So I think we can do better. And I think the players would tell you that there's opportunities for them to do better as well.
What did the film tell you about the defensive performance? Where were the breakdowns? What were kind of the things that stood out to you the most?
Well, I thought we lacked gap integrity at times. You know, I thought that we lost the edges at times, both in the run game and in the the rush game relative to the passing. I do think that obviously the backup quarterback, his skill set, the combination of runs that we got in the game were challenging. But overall, much of what I described earlier, mental errors, fundamental technique issues, some missed tackles, and then I do think there's some decision-making there, relative to my assignment. Some routine plays, that are frustrating, but also I think a combination of things that we could have done better as a staff to help them.
Does the lack of continuity, this is year three different defensive play callers, does that play into that? And I know it's a developmental game, but fundamentally, shouldn't you be more sound going into week 3, going into week 4?
Yeah, no, I think it's the same system, same verbiage. We have had 3 different play callers, but ultimately, you're recycling players too, right, in terms of experience. You start in January, you begin with the ending in mind, you're putting a system together. There's no question that the things you're describing there are the frustrating things to me, because I've been a part of teams and staffs that we played really sound fundamental football. And I think at times we're not doing that. Now, we do it really well at times as well. So I think consistency is what we're pursuing here. But I agree with what you're saying.
Do you see it from Monday to Friday in practice, and then it doesn't show up Saturday?
There's some of that. There is some of that. And I would say players voice that as well. Again, it's one thing to know, it's another thing to apply, right? That's not just life. I think that applies to about everything that we do. But in football, it's the case as well, right? You have to go execute in the moment. You have to go apply what you've learned. You have to go, and I think that's part of, there's a combination of things here from a responsibility, accountability standpoint.
You've had to rely on the, transfer portal for some offensive line additions, and obviously got elite one in year 1 in Osiris, but just curious about, maybe some of the challenges in that and building continuity when you're having to plug in guys from different schools versus kind of building it from the ground up and having young guys together.
Yeah, I think ultimately it was one of the initiatives when we first got here was we needed to get better on both lines of scrimmages. We've done that with a combination of portal players and high school players. We understand, I think anybody that's coached this league would tell you, to get to where you want to go, you've got to do a really good job on both lines of scrimmages relative to personnel, but also just in structure and how you teach, how you coach. So, but you're right. That is one of the challenges that we all face in this profession, right? We had an incredible group at the previous stop, right? Several NFL players, right? Joe Moore finalists. It was a strength for us. We would like to get to that place, I do think some of the players that we've added have played relatively well at times. I think we had issues at certain positions. We've struggled a little bit, but overall, that's part of the battle in college football at the elite level, no question about it.
How do you handle the quarterback position this week, and what type of going on the road? What type of dynamic does that add to it?
Yeah. Well, I would say that we're committed to playing both players, and I think, obviously, the impressive thing to me is just how both these guys have handled themselves, how they're working together, the camaraderie that they have. That piece is impressive to me. That can be divisive, if you got the wrong people in the building. So just the way they handled themselves last week, I think we tried to define it for them, so they weren't looking over their shoulder, and I think that worked. But the humility of both of these guys, the confidence of both these guys, and then the working relationship that they've had since the first day. So both have character, both understand the dynamic. I think both of them can help our team. And certainly it was great to have Graham back from injury, and I thought he played well for the most part. So one of the keys is that we have to play well around both these guys, and we have to have some form of balance. I think that's the whole key. You've got to play efficient on first and second down, stay out of these passing downs, and then we have to have some balance.
What did you learn about rotating them for the first time in a game, how the offense responded to them, and then could you see that rotation maybe changed based off of just going with the guy with the hot hand, or if you feel like you need a spark?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of it is open-ended, and they know that. But ultimately, my expectation is they both prepare well, they both practice well, and they both play lights out when given a chance, right? So, and I think we know when it's, sometimes on offense, we got a crowd in there watching the game. They don't know what, sometimes it's not the quarterback's fault, or it is the quarterback's fault, right? So we know, and I'm able to make decisions based off of that. If they're not doing what they're supposed to do, then they can stand beside me, So, but for the most part, I don't necessarily think we have that problem.
If you see yourself, you have a plan in place, one of the guys is going well, and you say, you know what, tell the other quarterback, hey, we're going to deviate from the plan this series and roll with what's working.
Well, I think the approach we've taken kind of gets DJ involved early, and then we kind of leave it open-ended after that. That's kind of commitment there. So both halves are that way. That's ultimately what we've decided to do.
DJ Douglas isn't the only guy who had some plays he'd like to have back, but what's your philosophy with guys who have a tough day, throw them back out there and let them try again, or maybe take them and let them take a back seat for a little bit and watch it and then?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think probably depends on what we've observed from that player, his attitude, his work ethic, his intent, where is he, how is he accepting coaching, what type of teammate is he, and then what type of depth do we have at the position. Sometimes you got no choice but to put the guy back out there. But I think every position is a little bit different. But what I'm describing is ultimately the way I would say sometimes a guy, we've probably figured that out before we got to the game, if that makes sense. So it's part of coaching, part of teaching is trying to get the player ready. And I think that's where ultimately we got to take a good look in the mirror. We got to get them more prepared to play.
You mentioned the importance of keeping the noise out. There's so much of it. Is it realistic to think it won't permeate? How do you manage that?
It's never going to go away, right? It's either going to be because, they love you if you win and they hate you if you're losing, right? So it doesn't matter if we were at Buchholz High School right down the road, So, look, we have to have some type of internal standard and objectiveness to what we do, right? It's got to be just as frustrating, if not more, right? I would say. I have personal objectives. I have expectations. That's ultimately the way I view it. Like it's the same for me, So, and look, I don't think there's anything that's more motivating to me than proving it, and making people proud. I think that's the key. So, the more people you meet that you listen and you hear the impact this place made on them. You listen to the stories, right? This place has been in, it's got great history and tradition. You want to get it back there, right? It's one of the reasons you take the job and accept the challenge. So, for me, outside of getting a lot of text messages from former players and coaches you've worked with and friends, it's next game, and what can we do to come up with solutions?
There is a buy-in aspect of the football as well. And the players publicly support you on Saturday. What's your temperature on them in terms of, getting the most out of them each week?
We haven't had that problem. I'm not saying we wouldn't have that problem going forward, but I would tell you we haven't had that issue. We got a group that shows up, and again today we've had 2 lift groups today, and it's pedal to the metal in there. They're ready to go.
Bill, you referenced your faith before, and at SEC Media Days, you quoted Hebrews, and faith is the assurance of things hoped for. What's allowing you to keep the faith in a time that's rough like this?
Well, yeah, I think we've done a ton of work. We have a lot invested, and we've seen progress in certain areas. you got to get some of these things figured out. You know, like there's parts of our team where what we did this offseason I think was successful. I think the strength and conditioning program, the nutrition, I think special teams is a positive trend, right? So I think we've added some good young players. We've added some good portal players. The detail and the execution of the football, that's where that punches me in the gut a little bit, right? So, and that's separate, you know, that's separate. I think coaching is it's a career, but more importantly, it is it's an opportunity, it's a platform, it's a way to impact people, it's purpose. That's what I would describe it as, right? But we're all competitive, right? So I think we all want to win, and we want to produce a good product, right? So, yeah, that's where my energy is at. That's what I'm trying to get fixed.
So what did Taylor Spirito do to, I'm not even be getting his name correct, to get, I haven't seen much of him. And
Yeah.
He played a good bit the other day. What has he done to kind of elevate himself into the lineup?
Well, he just makes plays every day. That's what he does. He's done it. Players would call him Dirty 30. That's his nickname, right? So all he does is get open. He makes plays. He's been a good special teams player. He's well respected amongst the team, and he's bigger, faster, and more skilled than you would anticipate. You know, he just does his job. So ultimately got a couple guys banged up, and he's been very consistent, productive in practice. It's not a day goes by out there that he doesn't make one of these catches. You know, the other day he caught a one-handed slant about 8 inches from the ground, you know. So, I mean, guy does his job. So he's one of these guys that's earned a scholarship, and we're going to put the best ones out there.
We saw him during pro day. He was good then.
Mm-hmm.
He was with Anthony.
Good football player.
Last week, the offensive line rotation kind of tightened up. Was that due to SEC play and roster limits, or is that those guys have kind of emerged and you found 5, 6?
A little bit of both. Yeah, a little bit of both. Just what we've observed through the first couple of weeks, what we felt like was best for the team. Still a ton of competition. Still trying to develop players, improve players. And there's a handful of those guys that are still a little green, you know. So practice matters, you know. Practice with the first and second group matters. That's where the offensive line develops. They don't develop on game day. You know, they develop in the good-on-good environment in the practice setting. You know, those are if they're not a portal player that's ready-made, and they did that somewhere else, right? They gained experience and they practiced with the first and second unit somewhere else. Then if they came here as young players, they have to do that here. So I think some of those guys are a little green, and we just got to continue to give them reps and continue to give them feedback.
And this week, travel roster 70?
74.
74. How much of the 74 do you know, hey, we're already going to take versus there's some spots, 5, 6, 10 spots that.
Yeah. Special teams will dictate the last dozen or so. You know, I mean, ultimately it's about what value do you bring to the team independent of offense or defense for those final few spots. It's all who's a backup or who's a starter, how many phases. But, you know, we could travel with less if we had to. But ultimately I think it's a positive that we can take more players, especially in a portal era, right? So I think most coaches would say they would take as many as you can.
Coach, talking about play calling, you previously said that every part of your offense would be evaluated almost every day, quality control. How would you evaluate the play calling aspect of your offense?
Yeah, I think some good, some bad. You know, I think ultimately, to me, what I've observed on tape is more about execution. You know, it's more about decision-making, fundamentals. You know, I think that hasn't necessarily been the biggest issue.
I'm surprised the run game hasn't gotten going a little more, and how much our team's kind of taken that away in the beginning from you guys.
Yeah. Hence my frustration. You know? So we've got to do better in that area. It's one of the things that makes the engine go, you know, and we have to do better. So some of that is we got to look at what we do well. You know, I think that's part of where we're at. You know, how do we generate some of that? You know, but yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I mean, that's one of the things that we've got to get going.